That there is William Lane Craig. A very well-known name in apologist circles. He's got a PhD in theology and a degree in philosophy. So, of course, being the internet warrior that I am, I'm going to tell him why he's wrong. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. It's good to see you all. I'm your pal, Black Swan, and today we are going to talk a little bit about William Lane Craig. Now, William Lane Craig is one of the most well-known apologists of the past 20 to 30 years. He's certainly one of the most well-known debaters, absolutely without a doubt. Back when I was a Christian, there's only 4 apologists who I can really remember knowing by name. McDowell, Sean, or his son. I forget the names. McDowell, who wrote Evidence That Demands a Verdict, of course. Lee Strobel, who wrote the hilarious Case for Christ, and I'll probably talk about that at some point. And, of course, Banana Man. And, of course, William Lane Craig. The very first video debate I ever saw was William Lane Craig and Frank Zindler. And that was when I was a Christian. And I found it really impressive. Craig is a very skilled debater. He's had training, he's had experience, he's done it on a collegiate level. It's obvious that he is very skilled at his debating. And that's not a knock against him or anything like that. He uses a lot of debate tactics. I think when Craig comes to a debate, he's very definitely looking to win a debate. And he uses strategies and tactics like you would in any kind of competition to try and win the debate. And a lot of people get upset about that. I don't have a problem with that. It's formal, structured debates. You're trying to win. There's a competitive air to it. I'm fine with using tactics. So there are going to be times where I talk about him where I will address not only the substance of what he's saying, but the style of his presentation. And I think that's fair game with Craig, because the style of his presentation is one of the tools that he uses in his debates to try and win the debate, to try and make his points, to try and be convincing in his arguments. So I think addressing both the substance and the style are valid. I am not going to impugn his character as a person. I'm not going to make assumptions about whether he's lying or not lying or being dishonest or disingenuous. I don't think that's really fair. And in his case, I don't think it's warranted, although there are some apologists for whom I think it probably is warranted. People that are outright lying, being intentionally deceptive, or being so willfully ignorant of subjects that have been explained to them over and over again, that you have to start to question their motives at that point. Kent Hovind is a great example of that. The man has been corrected on his description of evolution and science for decades now, and he refuses to change a word of what he's doing. The reason I'm going to talk about William Lane Craig is because he was such a big influence to me when I was a theist. I found his debates interesting. I found his arguments compelling. And being on the other side of it, I very much don't. And I've often been frustrated with some of his debate opponents because Craig uses a script. And so many times debate opponents have gone up against him and not addressed what he's going to be saying, kind of crazily over and over again. You'd think it would be easy to go in and immediately address his points, and especially watching the debate with Zindler, that old debate from a long time ago. Even now, as an atheist, I watch that, and I kind of cringe, and I'm like, is this really the best the atheist community at that time could put forward? because Zindler's presentation was rambling and unfocused, and Craig's was polished. It was the script. It was the script he's been using for the 20 plus years since that debate, and probably a long time before then. One of the things that really strikes me about William Lane Craig, um, and the reason this, what spawned this particular video was a recent video that Craig put up. I saw it on Facebook through the Unbelievable site. I will put a link to that below so you can watch the entire little clip. I will put little bits of it in here where they're relevant. But it's talking about God ordering the Hebrews to slaughter the Canaanites, man, women, children, everything top to bottom. And it's a horrific order coming from God. Like it's unashamedly immoral to commit genocide like that. Like we naturally see that and go, that's an awful thing to do. And Craig gets put in this conundrum where he sees that as a reprehensible, immoral act. But he also has this foundational belief that God is perfectly moral and perfectly just. And these two instincts, these two thoughts, are in conflict with one another. And you end up with an extreme cognitive dissonance. And this is how Craig can actually write down in his blog, and I'll link to that below too, that the people that God really wronged in this whole situation were the Israelite soldiers who were ordered to slay the children because it was an awful thing for them to have to do. And it's pretty bizarre. And one of the things I think where this cognitive dissonance is really clearly seen is in his little video clip here. And I'm going to play a relevant portion of that right now.
Now, in the Old Testament, probably the most difficult one is the command to the Israelite army to slaughter all of the Canaanites living in the land of Canaan. And what makes this so difficult is that it seems contrary to the picture of God portrayed elsewhere in the Old Testament, namely that the Old Testament portrays God as a God of love and mercy.
So this is the first part of the clip that really, really strikes me, is that Craig actually talks about the Old Testament presenting God as a God of love and mercy. And nothing could be further from the truth about the Old Testament. This is one of the great contrasts between the Old and the New Testament. You can certainly make this argument out of the New Testament, especially if you accept that Jesus is God. There's a lot of passages in there that talk about loving your neighbor and treating others as you would want to be treated yourself. There's better ways to phrase that, but that kind of thing. Love your neighbor, love God, being kind, these all sorts of socialist ideas about giving away your wealth, helping the poor. So you can superficially get this portrayal of God as this loving, caring God that opens his arms and welcomes all people. By contrast, the God of the Old Testament is terribly tribalistic and vengeful and violent and murderous. There's none of this open arms and loving to let people in. There was never an occasion where God was like, I will let this tribe of people in with the Israelites if they only love me. That just never existed. It was either they're going to be enemies of the Israelites and be mowed down, or maybe the Israelites will live alongside them. But there's not this loving opening. Like Israel is the chosen people. They are God's special people. God is portrayed and called jealous and vengeful. And it's a very violent portrayal of God that comes out of a much more violent epoch and time in humanity's life. Violence was all around at the time. Life was much more of a struggle. Death and suffering were constants in people's lives at that point, for the most part. And this already is a very strange way to phrase how you would describe the God of the Old Testament. But let's move on to the next part of the clip. And this is the part that really stood out to me.
who you'll remember in dealing with Abraham refuses to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah if there are 50 righteous people in the city. And Abraham bargains him down like a Middle Eastern merchant to, I think, 10 people. If there's only 10 in the cities, will you destroy them? And God says, no, I will not.
I think it is incredibly telling here how Craig phrases this description of this event. He talks about God refusing to destroy the city as if there was some external force compelling him to do it, when in fact a better way to describe it is God relenting from destroying the city. In fact, he even says at one part that, should I tell Abraham about what I'm going to do? This is God's decision about what he's going to do. This is not some external thing. God sees this city that's supposedly wicked and he's like, I'm going to destroy it. And Abraham comes along and begins to bargain with God. And I would never say like a Middle East merchant. That's actually kind of racist, because merchants in all kinds of different cultures bargain over things. That's not just a Middle Eastern thing, even though Moses happened to have been Middle Eastern, if he actually existed at all. But and in Abraham was Middle Eastern. So Abraham is bargaining with God, and he even says, don't get angry at me, as he pushes time and time again. If there's only this many, if there's only that many, if there's only that many, God relents, says, yeah, that's fine. If you find even just a few, I won't destroy the city. But it's God's intent to destroy the city. This isn't him refusing to do something that something else is putting on him. This is God is like, this city is evil and I'm just going to destroy it. And then Abraham comes along and tries to bargain with him. And Craig's phrasing of this as refusing to destroy the city makes it seem as though God didn't want to do this, like this was something that was difficult to him, or something external to God was coercing him to do it, because Craig has this cognitive dissonance going on. One hand, he believes there's this morally perfect, good, loving God who is also sitting there looking to wipe out an entire city. And these are two, like, commit genocide, and these are two mutually incompatible ideas. And Craig manages to resolve them by twisting the formulation of the narrative to make it look like God is somehow being compelled to do it and not doing it because he wants to do it. And there's many other examples in the Old Testament of God raining vengeance down on people, and unremorsefully, and ordering the Israelites to slay the Canaanites from man, woman, and child. And he's talking about it as if God's executing his judgment and it's somehow like a just thing to do. And it's very violent. What this was the Jewish retelling of historical events or embellishment of historical events that might have grown to legendary status, where they had these military campaigns and they were looking to justify their violence and say, we were right because God told us to do it. These are rewritings of history told by the victors or by the survivors or whatever. And the character of God in the Old Testament very much reflects the violence of that period.
So you've got this portrayal of God in the Old Testament itself as morally upright, righteous, just, and loving. And that's what makes this command to exterminate the Canaanites so puzzling. And what I would say is that when you look at it in its context, this represented God's judgment upon these Canaanite tribes. And he says to Abraham early on that the iniquity of these peoples is not yet complete. And so he will not judge them. Instead, he sends Israel into Egypt for 400 years while these Canaanite tribes plunge deeper and deeper into moral degeneracy, until finally, after hundreds of years, they were ripe for God's judgment.
See, this is another one of these really bizarre concepts that are in there, is that God would be planning to have judgment on the Canaanites because they were supposedly plunging into moral degeneracy. And earlier in the video, Craig mentioned things like child sacrifice. And I think it's ironic that it's somehow overlooked that the early Hebrews engaged in child sacrifice. This is a known historical fact. They were actually the Hebrews, as we know them from the Old Testament, were actually a splinter group of people from Canaan, the Canaanites. They were a different group that branched out off of that. And they engaged in child sacrifice, just like the Canaanites later did. But the fact is, he's visiting judgment, and he doesn't do it for like 400 years, supposedly. Sits around while these people are being malignant and malicious and destructive and slaughtering and sacrificing their infants, and just waits around and does nothing for some reason. This is utterly nonsensical. And then when it comes time to remove the Canaanites, let's say we think this idea is justified, that God is somehow justified in getting rid of the Canaanite tribes. How does he go about doing it? How does the omnipotent, all powerful God, who willed the universe into existence, go about getting rid of this tribe of evil people? Does he snap his fingers and flutter them away like Thanos in a humane and painless way? Oh, no. Nope. He sends the Israelites in to slaughter them. And this has really been like an epiphany for me as I've come out of Christianity and into atheism and turn around and look back at these stories. And I remember as a Christian, I would have listened to what Craig said and it would have seemed fine to me. It would have made sense that there's some theological explanation that's produced for why this is how it is and what's going on. And now I look back on it and I say, you know what? What's really going on is people were rewriting these stories and creating legends and myths around them and saying that they were commandments of God. It just seems so powerfully obvious from the outside that the Bible is a book of myths and mythologies from the ancient past. And it looks really not any different from any other book of ancient mythology. So I will do more of Craig's stuff. Like I said, he was a huge influence for me when I was a Christian. And I think that's why I feel drawn to respond to his information, to his messages, to his videos. I want very much, taking a cue from Paulogia, actually, to talk to the me that was back then and see what I would say if I could talk to the me who was a Christian back then. And addressing Dr. Craig would be a really good way to do it. I never thought deeply enough about the kind of information that was presented to me when I was a Christian. And this bothers me because I thought I was thinking deeply about it. And what I was really studying was apologetics, not arguments and information. I wasn't seriously looking and listening to the contradictory information, even though I thought I was. I was coming from a place where I had preconceived beliefs and notions that I already had, and I looked for information to confirm those. And I looked to the apologists for explanations about why these challenges that I heard didn't work. Instead of actually examining the challenges and actually seriously thinking, carefully thinking about what was being presented. And that's what I would advise old me to do, to really examine this stuff and think about it. And don't just take what the apologists are feeding you at face value. Don't just listen to the explanations and the excuses. Actually listen to the contrary information and examine it. So that's where I want to kick all of this off. And it'll take me time to go through all of his videos. I think I would like to take some of his debates. He opens every one of his debates with exactly the same script. And I'd like to go through that script and point out areas. And like I said, address substance and style, because Craig very much uses style in his debates. There's no doubt about that. Thanks for sitting through all this. Hopefully, it made sense. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or afternoon or weekend or morning or whenever you watch this. Thanks for coming by. As always, be kind to one another and peace out.